Good morning. I am Lisa Berkeley, and this is a reaction to response, which provides us an opportunity to hear from thought leaders who are helping us shift from fear-based reactions to care and compassion-based responses. I don't know, right now, today's slide, sorry for stumbling a bit on my words, is awakening your voice, speaking publicly and confidently expressing your voice. And our guest is Karen Knipalis, and we're going to turn to her in a few minutes. But first, I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview for today's call. So Reaction to Response was birthed through Charter for Compassion's Women and Girls sector. We're in over 400 cities with 1,800 partners in 52 countries around the world, and we're divided into 12 sectors. You can learn more about us at thecharterforcompassion.org. In today's call, afterwards, we'll have our webinar. We're going to switch to our after party. And during the after party, Karen is going to not only be able to speak face-to-face with all of you, but she's also going to be able to give us some exercises to really practice our public speaking and to feel confidently in that context. And for those who are feeling a bit courageous, she will work with you one-on-one. Before we begin, I'd like to go also into a little bit of housekeeping. First, this call is being recorded. Second, if you have any tech issues, you can go to zoom.us. And then lastly, if you have any questions or comments for Karen during the call, you can type them in the chat box or hover at the bottom of your screen and the Q&A option will pop up. I'd also like to take a moment and thank the folks who are working behind the scenes. Mimi Hulin, Brione Lathorpe, Susan DeGaia, and Betsy Spano. So thank you to all of you folks who are making this possible. Also, we do have a special sponsor for this month, which is Heartworks. They're a generous sponsor of this month of webinar series about awakening your voice. And then lastly, I want to go into the Sustainability Development Goals. As many of you know, that's one of the priorities of the women and girls sector to advance these goals. And this call connects to that because when you are able to speak your voice publicly, you can also then use it to speaking out and implementing care and compassion to make the world a better place. So just have a second to look at that, at the various goals. And then without any further ado, since we really are here to make the world a little bit better, let me introduce you now to Karen. Karen, good morning.
Good morning, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm awesome that you're here. And let's just get going. So when we first started talking about this subject, we had a great conversation around what does it mean to have a voice and what does it mean to speak your voice? And so you had some great thoughts on that. So you want to tell me.
What it means to have a voice. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's great to have a body, and probably next to body language, the most important thing that you can have is a voice, of course, and it's important to use it. They say that if you listen to a speaker and you go home and think about it, that 55% of the impression that you have of that speaker is their body language, and 38% is their voice, but only the coloring of their voice.
Oh, wow.
Content is only 7%. I'm sorry that everybody is just learning that now, because you know, when we're in school, when we are in training or in university, or when we're working or whatever, we are always trained to go for content. Usually to say so much into so little time.
Right.
And in so little time. And that is too bad, because really only 7% will stick. And voice is something that is so important, because it makes sure that it comes across, that your message is being heard, that you grab the person, that you reach the person on an emotional level, so that you will be definitely heard.
It's so interesting because when I've always worked with voice more through a healing capacity, we've talked about how empowering it is to own your voice, to project your voice, because it really enables you to have a say or stake at the table.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and especially because this webinar series is coming through the women and girls sector, one of the things that we like to focus on, as you and I spoke about, is the difference between how men and women communicate their voice. And when I say their voice, not just their feelings, but also intonation and, to your point, body language. And how does that tie into public speaking?
Well, public speaking is something that not many people really like doing. They say, they say that 80% of all people, it's a study, I think it's even a Harvard study, 80% of all people would rather die than get up in public and speak.
Oh my God, really?
It's worse than fear of death for most people. I mean, I'm a fan. I love it, but you will always be a little bit. You will always have a little bit of stage fright, because that's good. If you don't have that anymore, I think then you're not good anymore. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of that is fine, but most people have so much stage fright that they just, they go into extremes. Some people have a little bit of damp hands, and some people actually, they told me that they sort of feel like they're stepping out of their body and standing right next to themselves and looking at themselves like, what are you doing here? They literally don't know their name. Some people even faint. So it gets so, and anything's possible within these extremes, right? And it's really interesting to see. And of course, there are things that you can do about it. Mm-hmm. And it's just important that you know yourself, that you know your voice, that you know your body when you do public speaking. The better you know yourself, and the better you feel within yourself and the situation, the better of a speaker you will be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, you're reminding me of a couple of things. I have a friend of mine who's a very, very famous singer in Israel, Palestine. And he said to me once that always before he goes on stage, and he's been singing for, I don't know, 50, 60 years, for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Always he gets so nervous and he starts to panic and everything like that. Mm-hmm. He shared with me that one of his colleagues also would always vomit right before they went on stage, also a very well-known singer. So mm-hmm. Your point is well taken, even if you have a lot of experience with it.
When I work with people on stage, I'm a singer myself, so I know exactly what he's talking about. And when people tell me that they do stage work and I work with them, I always let them find a ritual for themselves to make them feel better. Mm-hmm. That can be vomiting, but they're nicer rituals.
That's not such a great ritual.
What I highly recommend is, next to drugs, is breathing. I mean, you can vomit, you can smoke something, you can throw in a pill, you can have a drink, whatever you want. But breathing, I think, is the best thing, because it doesn't have any side effects. It's always with you, so you can't leave it anywhere. And it is highly effective, and it will really calm you down. And when I go on stage and sing, I do my breathing, I do my voice work, and then I go out.
So before we go into like real practices and sort of tips and et cetera, you're reminding me of a couple of things. First, that people have a wide range of like how to deal with their nerves, as you've just pointed out, mm-hmm. but really with breathing being the most important or most effective, perhaps. Mm-hmm. I would also say to that, when we can work with our breath, that connects us more deeply to our inner wisdom. Mm-hmm. And especially when we're trying to get our voice, our passion out in the world, we have something to say. Being clear, clear and deeply connected to our heart. and to our body will definitely allow that message to come out more clearly. And I think especially as women, you know, so many women have struggled to speak their truth.
Oh, yeah.
And I think women struggle to get their voice out, and men struggle to know when to moderate their voice a little bit, to open the space to let another person, like a woman, speak. Of course, that is a cultural thing, but do you see a difference in how women feel about expressing their voice? And I don't mean in the presentation, I mean they have something they want to say, and maybe they communicate in a different way than men do.
Yeah, two things. Well, first of all, yes, women have a different way of speaking altogether. I could give you a whole lecture about that, and we don't have time for that now. It's just when you go back 30,000 years, when people started to live together, when they found out that it's easier to survive when we live together in groups. Men were the ones who were stronger and taller, right? And they were the ones who provided for the group because of their physical ability. They were the ones who went out and hunted, right? And came back with the food. And so they were the ones everybody relied upon. And women had a different role. They stayed home and they minded the kids and the fire and everything and the animals. And so from this situation, from this role situation, everybody had to sort of adapt to the situation also in communication. So women started to communicate in a whole different way. You know, they started to be more vague. They made sure they wanted to be absolutely understood. That's the reason why a lot of women, when they speak something that's important to them, say it 3 times, but just with different vocab. Which is an interesting observation.
Vocabulary. Sorry.
Vocabulary. Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Sorry.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, as you see over the last decades, how the roles are changing, how the roles get softer. I observe this kind of behavior not only in women, especially in young women, but also more and more in young men. Mm-hmm. And because you know, it's like I have to be a little more vague, and I have to watch out what I say, and so women are in general a little more insecure usually when it comes to talking, unless you've been grown up or you've been brought up in a family where you've been really encouraged to speak up, which is excellent if that happened to you. But for most women, it doesn't happen. It didn't happen, and it still doesn't happen. And so you have to do some work to get your voice across, which is of course important in today's world, especially still in today's business world. That's still a men's world. I work a lot with men and women, sometimes with separate groups, and I tell you, the experience is so different. It's so interesting.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, ask me.
I didn't get into a deeper introduction to who you are, because people can go to the website to read more, but I would like to just mention, first of all, obviously, based upon your accent, you're not a U.S. citizen, or not a U.S. native, I should say.
Yes.
And so you're German born and still do a lot of work between Germany and the US and probably other places around the world. Do you see culturally, because I know, and I'm mentioning this because we have a number of people from different places around the world on this call. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering if you see a difference in different cultures, how it affects how men and women communicate.
Oh, yeah. Culture is so important. So it's where to start. I migrated 5 years ago to the United States, and hopefully will be a citizen soon. And it's when I migrated, I thought, oh yeah, America. I mean, I've been here a million times, and before I migrated, I thought, oh yeah, easy. I know the place. I don't know anything. Every day I get a new lesson, and it's like, oh wow, really? okay, this is so different from Europe or from Germany. And when I observe people speak, it is so interesting. I mean, we are on planet California here right now, so I can't really speak for America. I've worked with some people who lived in New York for a long time, so on the other coast, and I lived in the Midwest for a year when I was a high school student. But that was a long time ago. So I still have an impression about, or an idea about how women and men are culturally differently in this country. California is just a place where people communicate in the most interesting way. It's do not go into confrontation by any means. It's really, I've never met as many people avoiding confrontation like in California.
Yeah.
For example, yeah.
Right.
Whereas the East Coast is very different. People speak their minds. It's a lot more like in Europe. People from New York always remind me of people from Berlin. They just throw your minds at you. You know, they just speak, wear their hearts on their sleeves. And as a German, I can really deal with that. And because it's sort of more my nature, we're very direct when it comes to talking. And also women are very, very direct in Germany. Yeah, people just tell you what's going on. They don't beat around the bush. Whereas in California, people are very polite, more quiet, and don't really come to the point. You know, when they want to tell you something. I noticed, and I feel that women and men are pretty equal here. People are just not into confrontation, and that's just a different culture. It has to do with the history of the place, and with the idea in America in general. It's a very young culture still. At least the culture that started 250 years ago, and so yeah, the culture is still finding itself, and also the communication. And it's nice to be here. You know, I love it, and people are very friendly, very polite, very open. And when it comes to confrontation, it's a different ball game. It's of course they go into confrontation and they can do it, but not as direct, not as easy as in Europe.
That's actually very interesting because, you know, you're using the term confrontation, and it makes me wonder, like, so where's that gap between I have what to say, and I have what to say in a public way, but I don't want to upset anybody or be confrontational.
Yeah.
So how does one, I would imagine that plays into the fears that one has before speaking publicly. And I just want to be clear here too, that we're taught when we speak about speaking publicly, we're talking both everything from being on stage, but also just simply giving a presentation in your work environment too. And it's also relevant to speaking with a circle of friends too. It can be a wide range when we speak.
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes,
just sort of putting that out there, because I'm sure that the people who are listening or watching this maybe have what to say, but maybe even struggle speaking in intimate circles sometimes.
Maybe, and I can only encourage to speak your mind. I noticed that, also when you talk with people, in Australia, for example, people in Australia, I never met people who are so chipper as they are. Really, always in a good mood, always great, you know, and which is fun, but there's also a deeper layer under that, yeah, and which they don't want to talk about, and which is interesting. And I love the Aussie culture, and but it's really shaped in a very different way. And when you go over to Asia, so all this Western culture is sort of the same when it comes to talking with differences here and there, and women have the right, of course, to speak like men do. When it comes to hierarchy, then in the working environment, it's a different ballgame again. But usually that's the case. And when you go into places like Asia, for example, then we have a different ballgame. Communication happens in such an incredibly different way, right? It starts with the eye contact, with the body language is completely different than in the Western world. And even though the Western culture sort of invades the Eastern culture more and more when it comes to business, still hierarchy and the way that people communicate with one another is the traditional way, and people who come from the Western world inside there have to adapt there, and which is interesting. And when I work in a company over here or in Germany, and they have people from Asia, they need to adapt to the Western idea of communication, which is not easy for them. It starts with the eye contact. Making clear eye contact with your superior can be hard, needs to be learned by some people. And it's just very different and very, very interesting to see that.
So how do you work with people? How in that way when you face that? Let's sort of do a little bit of a shift now from talking about the culture and everything, because I want to be sure that we cover really good.
Yeah, can I add one more thing?
Of course.
Because that was the second thing that you inspired me to say. Because you mentioned, I remember that you mentioned when we're talking in private circles, like with our friends or co-workers or something like that. What I find extremely important is that you do speak your mind, because if you don't, you're going to explode at some point, right? Mm-hmm. Because as soon as people work together, there's friction is happening. And you can't, in Germany, we say if you can't like everybody, you can't get married to everybody, right? So, of course, it's normal that there will be friction. So what you have to do is to speak your mind. And I think it's always important to look at the way that you speak your mind. I highly recommend using iMessages, which is essential.
So iMessages, you don't mean by EYE eye contact. iMessages as in...
Oh, no. I mean letter I. It's just a difference. When I say, Lisa, you've been late this morning. You've been 10 minutes late this morning, which isn't true, by the way. I'm just making this up, okay? Okay, so Lisa, you've been late this morning. Versus, Lisa, I see that you've been 10 minutes late this morning. Mm-hmm. There's a difference, right? It
totally feels different. On one hand, even though that wasn't a truism, I found myself immediately being like getting defensive and like, I'm in trouble or something, which is really interesting. But when I see that you actually just gave me space to say, is it true? And how do I feel about that? And that was like in a nanosecond.
Yeah, that would have been my next question. How do you feel about it? And you already answered that. So when I say if I could say you message, you are late, you didn't bring out the trash, you didn't send that email, then it's an accusation. I'm attacking somebody. And the usual reaction is that the person closes down. Actually, when you send a you message, the conversation might as well be over. Mm-hmm. Unless it's an appreciation. And I say, I think you look beautiful today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you look beautiful today, and you are really gorgeous, or what you just said is absolutely wonderful or true or whatever, right? So use you messages for appreciations, but please only. So, but if I give you an iMessage, I see that you were late this morning. I see that email hasn't been sent. I see the trash still standing here. That gives space.
So I'm going to just put a pause here for two things. For those of you who are regular watchers or participants of the Reaction to Response series, one of the things that Karen is referring to brings us back to an earlier conversation with Riane Eisler, and also where the Charter for Compassion is going as far as helping to build cities of partnership and compassion, which is based on Riane's work, which is helping us shift from a domination culture, okay, where we have hierarchy and we inevitably make people or somebody be less than, to a partnership one where we're really working in collaboration. And sometimes people say those sound like lofty goals, right? So how do we do it in real world? Right here is a very clear example of helping us shift from domination to partnership. Because when Karen, for example, just said, I felt diminished and I felt wrong and defensive.
Yeah.
But when you said, I noticed you were late, I was like, okay, so now we're engaging in conversation now, and we're seeing one another eye to eye. Exactly. As an EYE. Well, actually, interestingly, EYE to I, but also eye to eye. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to put that pause, that interjection here, because it is relevant to this whole series. And also, you're kind of reminding me, oh gosh, I forget his name, but the work of nonviolent communication. Yeah.
Marshall B. Rosenberg.
Right. Marshall Rosenberg's work, which, by the way, is really, it's very rooted in this kind of way of communicating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all iMessages that he uses. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, so I didn't mean to take us off topic of actually public speaking, but just to notice that how we do speak is also how we can help shift a culture and a way of being in the world.
Yeah, and iMessages are really great in public speaking. I mean, think of Martin Luther King, I had a dream.
Oh, you give me goosebumps. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a dream, right? So it's always cool if you speak about yourself. People want to know about people. That's why gossip magazines are so incredibly successful. Yeah, even if it's not true, we don't care. We just want to know. And so if you do a public speaking event, what is really important is how you get into it. The most boring, so boring introduction that you can give to an audience is to say, "Hi, I'm Karin, and my topic today is breakfast." If people would leave, then you would deserve it, really. Because it's so much more fun if you would say, "Hi, my name is Karin. I had this gorgeous breakfast, this fabulous breakfast this morning. You know, I had berries and I had cereal and I made a smoothie. And what do you have for breakfast?" You know, it's a totally different ballgame to get into a topic.
That's a really significant point.
It is. Or you can just ask a question. No matter what topic you talk about, you can always ask a question. "Hi, I'm Karin. Do you know about the numbers from last year, from the last quarter? Mm-hmm. Did you have breakfast this morning?" You know, whatever the topic is, always, if you don't feel creative this morning, just ask a question. It's fine. Okay. Yeah, that's so much better than just saying, "Okay, here are the numbers from the last quarter."
You remind me of back in the days of working in international banking. I remember I went to this meeting and they were always so dry, but I will never forget the one of, I forget what his title was, but he walked in and he just said, "I just want you all to know that I really don't want to be here, but you know, how do you feel?"
Yeah, awesome.
And as soon as he did that,
yeah,
it changed. It
everything.
Yeah. Okay, there's truth here. There's truth.
Yeah.
And you go back to speaking the truth and asking and inviting somebody on how to speak the truth.
Yes, truth is sexy. It engages people. Anything that engages you on an emotional level is sexy. Is fun. That's what we want. That's the kind of connection that people are after. I have a friend who worked in the advertising business, very, very tough business, right? For a very long time and for decades. And he started his Monday morning meetings that everybody hated, of course. He started those with a very, very interesting ritual. So that they all sat in this office, like 20 people, and they all knew each other. And he started off that one person had to turn to their neighbor and state an iMessage and give them an appreciation. So they said that, John, I think you look great today. And then John turned to the next one, and so on. And it was really cool. And after that round, the meeting started from a very, very different angle than it would have usually started.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, iMessages can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a question. So we're at a little bit of a pause. Susan says, thinking about Californians avoiding confrontation reminds me of a particular Californian who is confrontational, who I admire, Governor Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So while we do, yes, I do avoid confrontation, I appreciate having someone speak for me in a confrontational way.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? How could more of us speak to the community in that way without going against the norms?
Yeah.
Interesting question.
Yeah. But Jerry Brown is famous for his way of speaking, of being confrontational, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that about him. And you may argue about his politics, but the way that he acts towards people, I think, is absolutely fine. I love it. I love it that he said, for example, oh, we're leaving the Paris contract, great, and California won't, because we're into over here we're very much into building new energy and stuff like that, and he's not going to give that up, and he says that clearly, and I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And what I think we have to, the point that we have to come to is that it is not against the norm to speak our voice, to speak out. It should be the norm that I speak my voice. So thank you so much for that question. I totally appreciate it. And if you want to speak your voice, do so, and do it in an iMessage. Then you will not hurt people, because that's usually what people are afraid of. They say, oh, I cannot speak my voice because I don't want to hurt people. And it's not about that. You have a right to say what you want, but it always depends on how you say it. The what is not as important, 7%. That's all everybody else will get from you, not more. But how? When you talk to somebody and you go home and think about it, and think about that conversation, or think back 50 years after, you will never remember what that person exactly said to you, or what they were wearing, or what they were eating or drinking, or how they smelled. You will always just remember the feeling that you had with that person. And if you are able to be in integrity and speak your truth in a way that doesn't hurt people, people will appreciate that and remember, and they will respect you for it. I promise you that.
I forget, there's some quote, I think it's a Maya Angelou quote, who says, people will always remember how you made them feel. Not even what you did, but how you made them feel.
Always how you made them feel. And when I say, Lisa, I noticed you haven't sent that email yet, which was so important. And I feel let down. And what I need from you is to explain to me why you didn't do that, and I'd like you to do that now. That's a different ballgame than saying, oh, you haven't sent that email yet. Are you insane? We had a deadline. Why didn't you do that? Okay. And excuse me, one more thing. And I can also say that with all my feelings, I can use the iMessage. I can say, I see you haven't sent that. That was really important for me. I feel really let down. Okay. What I need from you is to explain to me why. Please explain to me why, what happened. Okay, so I can put all my energy and my emotion in there. Using iMessages and saying it in a truthful way doesn't mean that you just have to say, oh, I'm so disappointed, Lisa. I really hated that you didn't say. No, that doesn't work, okay? So you've got to be genuine, and that's part of the deal. And even if you're genuine and even if you are emotional, that's fine. If you show yourself vulnerable, that's truthful. And then you will get people on the emotional level, and they will remember that in a positive way.
That's so important. And you remind me too, because of course, in this, I was taking, even though there's no email, right? I still took in everything
Yeah.
you said. I was like, oh God,
No
you know.
email.
And what I became aware of too was like how much most of us are our own worst enemies. We can beat ourselves up, especially as women, better for like making mistakes. Maybe not everybody falls into this category, but most.
Most women do.
Well,
Most women do.
yeah, most women, I like, they're immediately, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid. What did I do wrong? And so, actually, in this space, again, this kind of communication style, you've opened it up that, like, I can relax. I don't have to go into beating myself up. I can ask myself, why did I miss that? Why did I not get it out on time? Oh, why did I let Karen down?
Mhm.
You know, it's a different, I can reflect. There's
Yeah.
space for personal reflection, which is so important.
And maybe you couldn't send the email because you didn't get a piece of information from me that I promised to give you.
Yeah.
So instead of going into an argument like, oh yeah, guess why I didn't send that email? Because you didn't give me the information I needed. Then you have Israel and Palestine, right? So, and we don't want to go there. So what you can do is, okay, if I would say stuff to you like that, you could say, I hear you, Karen, and I remember that you wanted to send me that information. I didn't get it yet, so that's why I couldn't send it. Then I can say, "Oh my good Lord, I forgot." Or
Right. So that's interesting. Or the other way though, you could say, well, why didn't you remind me to send it? Like, okay, so it's an interesting way of how do we bring space into
yeah,
what.
very good point. Very good point, Lisa. If you would say, "Well, why didn't you remind me?" Then I could say, "I hear that you say, why didn't you remind me?" That touches me in a strange way because I feel it's not part of my job to
Right.
remind you of that, for example. Or I remember that I did remind you yesterday and I didn't get it yet. What are we going to do now? Okay. So, whenever a confrontation happens, it doesn't mean that I have to get into it. I don't have to buy into any feeling that somebody throws at me.
Mhm.
I can, but I don't have to.
I think it's important because this is a practice that I try to practice, and sometimes, to be honest, I fail miserably
Oh,
at. And
welcome to the club.
and and I think that there's something really important for those of us who are trying to speak more clearly, who are trying to speak and be more compassionate and care based and work in a space of partnership, whether it's in a public forum or in a place of intimacy between friends, that not only are we going up against our own inner voices and our culture and our family dynamics, but it's also a global culture. I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at the state of the world and if you look at where we are in relationship to the environment, for example, we've been in this domination mindset. It's your fault. You did it wrong, rather than saying,
Exactly.
I hear, and by the way, and I've said this on other calls too, but whenever we say you, I've got one finger pointing at you, but I've got three pointing back at myself. So
Right.
here's a reminder. And it's a process and it's a journey. And it's so important to keep that in mind. And I think too, to go back to how we sort of started this conversation about when people go to stand up publicly and speak, like these people who feel like vomiting and feel nervous and all of these things, right? That's part of, I believe that's part of letting go of or shifting the old patterning that you're going to be wrong, you're going to be a failure, you're going to not succeed, right? Which are what those inner voices often are that give us that stage fright, if
Oh,
you will. So,
yeah.
what can people do to help?
Stop trying to be right. Stop trying to be. That is so easy to say, I know. And stop trying to be right. If choose your wars wisely. um, it's hard to say. It's I try to dis I try. Okay, I try. I try to decide to go to war less and less in my life. And when I look back at every time when I chose to go to war, it would be a lie to say I could not choose to do differently. You always have a choice, and sometimes we all have this hurt inner child, this wounded inner child, which gets triggered all the time. And then we let go sometimes and we get into it and we get into an argument and nobody wins. Mm-hmm. Even I just beg people to try to stay at least conscious when they go into a confrontational conversation. Mm-hmm. Catch yourself. And if you see that you are in the wounded child, usually there's always a point in the conversation where you still have the choice to get back into your adult and take care of your child later.
I just want to clarify this because we just sort of shifted without a real clear clarification. I mean, you mentioned it, but just to point out so people get what we're talking about. That we all have stories that we've been raised with. Some of them are wonderful, some of them are very painful, and very often, our innate. So a lot of the research around early childhood development and forming ourselves into adults, right? Shows a couple of things. One, that we are hardwired for love, care, and compassion. So we all want to be loved and to give love and receive love. And also that, we do have our wounds that come from childhood, that come also from our culture, because we've lived in dominating cultures that are not about partnership, that are not about freeing your voice. So there's a wounded inner child who lives in our heart and soul that still sometimes wants to be loved and be acknowledged. And we carry that with us very often for a long time until we can shift it. And to your point, when we feel angry, afraid, or vulnerable, that piece of us will come out to fight or protect themselves. So so what I'm hearing you say is that
thank you for summing it up.
Right. Well, it's important because we did take a jump and maybe not everybody is familiar with it.
Okay, thanks. It might sound, when I say that in Germany, people say, "Oh yeah, she lives in California. Of course she says that." And then I explain, it's got nothing to do with that. It's a fact. I had a really great teacher. His name was Sten Dale. He founded an institute called the Human Awareness Institute in California. And he said, anything that people say or do, it's either a cry for love or an act of love. And now it sounds corny, but it's the truth. And so to put that into my reality, is that if somebody attacks me, if somebody comes up to me and says stuff that I don't like to hear, I try. It works better and better the more you work with it. I try to not say anything, to not getting defensive, but to listen. I try to listen. And I feel the closer the person is to me, like when it's family or close friends, the harder that is, because I want them to love me, right? We all have that very, very deep want to be loved and to belong, right? And if people who are close to us don't seem to give that to us, that is very painful for most people. And so what is really cool is if you manage to just listen and acknowledge your feelings. That's all you need to do in the moment. And when the person has finished, it's best to say thank you and to think about it. Or if you want to say something, get back to them at using iMessages. It's hard and it's interesting because it's so different from what you've ever done. It changes the mood of the whole conversation, because if somebody comes to you and gives you destructive feedback, so there's two kinds of feedback, right? There's destructive feedback and constructive feedback, just like communication. then usually when somebody does that, when somebody gets into a destructive way of saying, they always have a good reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually doesn't have anything to do with you, but with their patterns that they learned.
Mm-hmm. That's really, really important thing to say. To recognize is sometimes it has nothing to do with you.
I would go so far to say it never has anything to do with you, because people react the way they react, the way they've learned, no matter who's in front of them. And if you put that onto public speaking, that's the point when I work with people where it comes to working with the audience. There will always be people on the audience who look out the window, who yawn, who look at their watches, who play with their phone. And all I can say to the speaker is, do not take that even seriously, and especially do not get offended. Do not get offended by it, because they're just being people. And after about 6 minutes, every mind shuts off, and you go somewhere else. You think about your laundry, your grocery list. People think about an encounter they had. They think about sex. They think about money. They think about anything, but they're not with you. And then at some point they come back. Mm-hmm. Okay, so lots of people always ask me when they do. Lots of people ask me when they do public speaking, like, oh yeah, I see somebody and they're playing with their phone, or they're talking to their neighbor. Should I address them? Heck no. Because we're not in school. Do not address them. Don't say, excuse me, you two there. Would you please listen? Don't do that. No, leave them be. If you get annoyed, if the group starts to talk and you get annoyed, don't speak anymore. Just be quiet and just look into the group. Just give them eye contact. And at some point they'll get it, and then they will quiet down, and then they come back to you.
And we wonder why only 7% of content is maintained.
Yeah, we are not very good. The human species is not good at getting getting impact in. We can only manage like 7. I think it's 7 every second.
Well,
that's not good.
No, it's not. But you really also remind me too of how do we process information. Because if somebody's lecturing or talking, or maybe even listening on a webinar, right?
Yeah.
Unless the people speaking are really engaged on an emotional level and within their own body, within their own being, they're going to lose speakers. When I think of when I look to speakers I've enjoyed, they are so emotionally engaged in their own story or in their bodies that I'm riveted. But somebody who's just talk, I'm like, I'm the first one to be like, oh, okay, I won't with my phone, but I'll shake my leg and I'll think about 10 million things I have to do.
Yes. Yeah, so it's always important to engage people on the emotional level. And the neutral level is very important too, because people know then that you know your business. So if you give them facts, data, percentages, digits, great, but never more than 10 to 20% of the whole speech. 80 to 90% should be the emotional level. And so people come to me and say, like, what if I have to present digits? I think, great, and take the 3 most important ones. If you have a whole bunch of digits, take the few most important ones and tell a story about that. Tell the background story. What happened that it came to that digit? Was it good? Was it not good? Tell the audience why it's good, why it's not good. Make it interesting, for God's sake. Yeah. Otherwise, people will die listening to you.
And also, to your point, what you said earlier, make it relevant. Tell the story, but like, how did it get there? But what is not just, well, we put this number with that number and came up with this percentage, but also give it the human impact story, right? Because to your point, people like to hear gossip. People like to hear other people's lives and stories. So
yeah. Always remember that. It doesn't mean that you have to gossip when you talk. It's just, I highly recommend not to, but make it interesting. Tell them something about yourself, how you feel about it, and what happened. The story,
So we're almost, so very surprisingly, this
Oh,
hour has gone almost, we're almost at the
mhm.
end of the hour. So I just want to recap on a couple of points because it's been
Sure.
this has been a more of a conversation thing than a presentation, which
Yeah.
also is part of the point, right?
Yeah.
Um, so to just cover some of the main points that we've talked about around public speaking. Um, do you want to recap, or would you like me to recap what I hear you say? And probably it's better for you to recap because this is your expertise. Well,
Oh, well, what, so you just want me to repeat what we talked about?
well, so yeah, or you know what? Tell me if we'll do a test, and I may wish I
We
never
can do
did
it
do
together, Lisa. We can do it together. Oh,
there.
I wish I could remember what we all covered. You would have told me, I would have written it down. Oh, well. So
Well,
iMessage are important. iMessages.
right.
Yeah, we talked about iMessages. We talked about um, engaging on an emotional level with people is very important. We talked about how differently men and women speak in the cultural context.
We also, well, I'm more thinking not just about everything that we've talked about so far,
All right.
but really, sorry, really the practical skills that, because we've touched on a lot of things that are relevant for people to take away from this. So
Yes.
we talked about the importance of breath and
Yes. Yes.
really breathing, which we're going to get into a little bit more probably in the after party about actually working with our breath in public speaking.
Yes.
We talked about in that context, breath being a little bit more important and better than drugs or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about using I statements.
Yeah.
We've talked about just being conscientious of our fears and insecurities that can make us feel like a failure, that we won't succeed, and recognizing that that may not actually be relevant to today, that may be connected to our stories that are cultural stories or old familial stories. And that's to also acknowledge our inner child can be creating that fear because we want to love or be loved, to express love or our wisdom, because hopefully love is our voice, as we express our voice, is a reflection of care, compassion, and love, even if we're upset about a situation.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the emotional underpinnings of what's going on in your psyche before you speak publicly. Okay?
Right.
And to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
So to acknowledge where our positionality, we would say in the academic world, from where are we coming
Yeah.
and from
Where we're
what's
coming from.
previous,
Mm-hmm.
right? Breath, I statements, recognizing that including your emotional, being present in your body and in your feelings when you speak as well.
Mm-hmm.
And breath can definitely help with that,
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
because that'll help engage.
Mm-hmm.
What else? I think we've also touched on, well, my takeaway is also have fun with it if you can, and be
Oh,
curious.
please, yeah. Oh, always, like, yeah, like I said earlier, the better you feel about yourself and in the situation, um, the more the audience will like you.
Right.
You
And it might,
and
yeah.
excuse me, and do not ever aim to be perfect, because that is the most boring thing on the planet. Okay, just be yourself. That's be authentic, be yourself, make mistakes, and make them publicly. It's fine. You know, we all live and learn, and do not even try to be perfect. Try to make it good, that you are happy with it, but don't be perfect.
Right on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, Karen, what do you think, feel? And also, people who are watching, you can feel free to answer this in the chat box so we can get a sense of where people are at. We can either continue. So, Karen, we're gonna, if it's good timing for you, we'll switch into more sort of practical
Yeah,
tips
lovely.
for doing public presentations.
Yes.
We can either do it here in this platform, and this is people who are participating or watching, please either say stay here or switch to the after party also,
Mm-hmm.
because if we switch to the other platform, you'll be able to see everyone on video,
That'd
and
be
then
great.
you, yeah.
Let's do
So
that.
my concern is I just don't want to lose participation here from people who are still engaged here.
Yeah, yeah.
Bum, bum, bum. I don't see any responses yet, and I know that we have people here. So
I have 19 participants here.
no, no, Karen,
7.
Karen, hold on one second, Karen, one second.
I'm not going to do anything. No.
Yeah, that's okay. No, there's the come. You're ready. Okay, so Brenda's ready for an after party. Okay. So why don't yeah. So why don't we go ahead and switch? We've
Yeah.
got a couple of people that have said to switch. So before we switch, what I'm going to do is I am going to put us up on the screen now. One last time, where are we? Let me share my screen with everyone. So Karen, this has been absolutely fantastic being here with you, and thank you so much for this part of the conversation. I'm looking forward to switching over to the after party.
Thank you, Lisa.
And I'm going to just keep us here for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I'm putting on our screen the URL for the after party, where you can either phone in or join online.
Yeah.
And while we're doing this, I will also invite people to keep in mind our next reaction to response webinar will be August 6th. And in August, we're actually going to be switching our topics from awakening our voice to living in a new economy, and shifting from a transactional economy to a heart-centered economy. And for those of you who were here with Natalie Pace, she's going to be one of the people who's going to come back. And then we have Nicole Moen and Mark Silver for the month of August. It's going to be a really fun month, so I hope you will all enjoy. Well, yes, I do hope you'll enjoy us, but I also hope you'll join us. Okay, thanks so much, and please, we'll see you in the after party. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.